Kia ora and welcome to Who's Who, in conversation with community champions. My name is Priti Garude and I'll be your host for this episode. Who's Who is a collaboration between Communities Action Trust and Apna Network NZ, where we talk to frontline leaders and community champions who've been at the forefront of helping their communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we're in conversation with Janif Khan Janif. Jennifer, welcome to Who's Who.
Thank you, Priti.
Jennifer is a human rights advocate and she's a community development practitioner. And Jennifer has been working in the community for years and years, where she's seen the real impact of COVID, as well as how life was before COVID, how life was during COVID, and how it has been now that we're sort of trying to get over the pandemic. So Jennifer, just to get into the conversation, if you could just give us a little bit of who you are, because we're talking about who's who here. So who are you? Just give us a little bit of a brief about you.
So thank you, Priti, for the warm welcome to the show. I've been volunteering in the community. I'm a community development practitioner for good 3 decades now, and specializing in working with migrant and refugee communities. So I've specialized in the area of community development initiatives which look at settlement programs and also issues around intergenerational parenting, youth development, and just, support that helps families to settle well in New Zealand and have a meaningful life.
Yeah. So your work has always been quite focused on communities. So just while we're talking about who's who and we're talking about the impact that COVID has had, you must have seen quite a bit of transition since, right? So let's talk about a little bit about what your work looked like. What were the initiatives, or what kind of a work you had when pre-COVID? Let's talk about that first.
And as I was mentioning earlier on, Priti, with pre-COVID. So basically working in the community and collective communities is all about, working alongside communities. They have the, they know the issues, they have the solutions. So it's just supporting, being the facilitator, bringing in resources. And as I mentioned earlier on, a range of programs: women's development, youth development, parenting program, intergenerational issues, that need identity, settlement issues, whole raft of programs. Whatever the need of the community identifies, you support the community, as I said, walk alongside them and support them in the process. So being face-to-face, building relationship, trusted relationships is so important to be able to do any form of community development projects or initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then during COVID, like when the pandemic hit in March 2020, everything's shut down. We went into lockdown. We've over the past 2 years, we've heard, what sort of an impact that has had on people's well-being, on different aspects of their life. Like there's the professional as well as there's the personal aspect. Is there something that you would like to share from the work that you've done with the community on that?
Yeah, I mean, the lockdown itself was like a new experience. Your life's on the go, you're getting things done, just so much to do. But then all of a sudden the lockdown happens, and it's not just in New Zealand, but globally, new phenomena, and you think it might be over in a couple of weeks' time, but it dragged on for, as we know, 2 years. So it was like a whole shift in mindset that you could not get out of your home. You had to suddenly think of, communities that you work with, those that have language barrier, how were they going to navigate the system, the vulnerable population, those with transport issues, the elderly who were stuck in homes. Somebody's got to do their shopping, somebody's got to do the drop-offs, somebody's got to do the welfare checks. Medication had to be picked up from the pharmacy. So this is where, with the trusted relationships we have with communities and working in with a range of social service providers and government agencies, you know, suddenly you had to, and getting used to the idea of technology, Zooming, because you could no longer, yeah, that was life. You couldn't meet in person, and so you're learning new technology, especially for people like me who are not tech savvy. And but through good support from you know, a range of providers and government departments. For example, I can think of a program or initiative that we set up, welfare checks, which was manned by volunteers from the community, and that was basically calling up, you know, volunteers calling up the elderly and others in the community, morning checkup, just to see how they were doing, what support was, because you're stuck indoors, and you suddenly, and then you you know, somebody cut off from the family, from the community, and then you worry about families in our home countries as well.
And that's been one of the biggest battles that has happened for the harder to reach communities as well as the migrant communities primarily, right? It's not just the aspect of what's happening in New Zealand right now, but what's happening in our home countries. Even if you've moved away from there for like 20, 25 years, you've still got an attachment that's there to your home country. So it was also working on that aspect of their well-being, right?
Yeah, exactly. And especially when, you know, with travel restrictions, borders being shut down, when the loss of a loved one overseas and you know, family members couldn't, the grieving process, and then again, locally, you know, in the communities, no one can visit each other. So you're basically on your own, and the impact it has on one's well-being.
So we've touched upon what was the impact that COVID had. So you and I have spoken about what, you know, so the initiatives that sort of were brought to life to counter that impact, to bring that sense of cohesiveness within the communities. If you could just give us a little bit of insight into that as well.
As I touched on earlier on, so to get any initiatives up and running, because you were also working with limited resources, but what helped was the established relationships with the community members, community leaders and representatives, and also the providers, because say, for example, sourcing of groceries. So you had to know your networks as to what's available, who's available, medication, who could do the drop-off, and some of the financial constraints, where to do the referral to. And that could only have been done with the strong networks that we have with other providers and agencies.
And I want to touch upon the Creative Collective that we've spoken about. And Creative Collective, Jennifer will of course give us a little bit of a more brief into what Creative Collective looks like. But actually, let's just go into that. Why don't you give us a brief of what Creative Collective is?
So, you know, when you work frontline, especially in, you know, during the COVID lockdown and in difficult situations, being a frontliner, I myself am a creative artist. And so basically I do story writing, storytelling, you know, poetry writing, and one of my passions or writing is around migration stories, because, you know, my ancestors came from India, Guyana, Afghanistan, and Solomon Islands, you know, having gone to Fiji then. The second leg of migration was coming to New Zealand, because the first coup of 87 was the push factor for our families. And so during this lockdown period, you know, mental well-being was so important. So for those of us that were working as volunteers, being on the front line, and majority, you know, mostly females, we would have an online session on mostly Friday evenings. So each one who is a writer, who's a painter, was able to, you know, share online. This is what I've written. Or I would read the poem out and share with each other. And so, and then also one of our members of the collective now, but she'd been with us from the outset, had a negative experience, which kind of got us to think creatively and say, words are powerful.
Yeah.
How could we support this experience that she had, this negative experience, and turn it into something positive? And that's how Creative Unlimited Collective was, came into being.
Yeah.
And so basically, as I said earlier on, it's a collective of painters, artists, writers, poets, and so forth.
That certainly would have been quite therapeutic,
Yes.
especially during the lockdown when everything shut down. It would have been an outlet.
Yes.
For
Definitely, Priti. As I said, so it was a regular, like every Friday evening, we'd get together online and spend a good 2 hours just talking through, debriefing as well, and supporting each other, because as, if you work on frontline, then it's about your well-being as well, because then you're able to help others.
Yeah.
And from there, we've continued with, post-COVID and post-COVID recovery. So we've gone on to do webinars,
right.
The collective in collaboration with others. So earlier this year in March, we hosted a webinar online on interracism within ethnic communities.
Okay.
And we've just had another webinar last week. We facilitated another one online, which was looking at the topic or the theme of religion as patriarchy control, justifying gender violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That would have been,
Yes.
that would have been an intense conversation.
Yeah, intense, but hey, it's something that, a topic
Definitely
that we
needed.
need.
Yeah,
need
definitely
to
something
continue.
that needs a discussion.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer. This was,
Yeah.
I look forward to attending one of those webinars,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
That
Next
would be, yes, for sure. And thank you for all of your work that you've done for the communities over the past few years, as well as with during COVID as well. So yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Priti, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Priti Garude, and we'll see you at the next episode of Who's Who in Conversation with Community Champions.